Hello, welcome back to the permissions series. In this tutorial, we focus on model level permissions within Django views and templates. If you are looking for the previous tutorials in this series, then go ahead to the playlists and you're looking for Django permissions, just called Django permissions. It might change to mastery at the end there, but inside of here, you're going to find, at the moment too, this is the third tutorial in this series. If you are completely new to Django, then it'd be well worth going back to the first tutorial first and work through this playlist step by step. So what we have in this tutorial then is the model level permissions focusing on views and templates. And then in the second tutorial, we'll have a look at object level permissions focusing again on views and templates. I won't be covering all aspects here in 3 and 4, but I will drill down to the basics to give you a short overview, and hopefully that slims the tutorial down a little bit so that you can then go ahead and give me some suggestions on as to where to take this tutorial series in the future. There is a link in the video description which will take you to a project folder which you can download and access the base project for this tutorial. Once you're set up with the project folder, then go ahead and create a virtual environment if you like. If you're not too sure how to create a virtual environment, just go over to the channel. There is a setup guides playlist which will give you some instructions on how to set up virtual environment in your operating system. So I've turned the virtual environment on and there is a requirements file here. It's really simple. You just really need to install Django. We're not actually using Django Guardian, so I'll get rid of that. So you can just literally just type in pip install and then Django. And as long as you've got Python installed, of course, everything should be absolutely fine. So second to that, I have created a small set of data that you can utilize. So in fixtures here, I've got just a few users. So there's 4 users in total. So an admin user, a user called user project manager, a user team leader, and a user project member. So there's 4 users in total. To install these, if you type in Python manage.py, and then I've created a management command which will load this in. It's called user fixture. So user fixture, and that will just go ahead and just fire off this fixture and install those. So there's no need here to make migrations and migrate, because I've already added these commands into the command that we just run there, our custom command we just run. So no need to do that. So you should have now a database here, and then you should have some users inside of that database. Here I'm using an extension SQLite. So you can then go ahead and just open the database. If you right click SQLite, the extension, and you can just access your tables just to show that we've now got 4 users ready to go. There we go. So just quickly then, I'll show you the actual project. So we'll just go ahead and run the server. See if we can go and access this. So this is the simple project we created. So there's 3 pages essentially, or 3 levels here. We have the index page where users can log in, and so we have an admin user. All the passwords for these users are password. So I log in, and that takes you then to a project management page. So from here, I can then select project listings, and you can now see, apologies. So what's happened, this was the index page, sorry. So now because I'm logged in, it's changed to project listings. So I can access the project listings. There are no projects here, but I can go ahead and add a new project by default. So let's just call this new project. So this must be a slug. So be careful of that. So new project, we'll call this new project 1. I submit that, and you can see now we have a new project. Just some other notes, you can see that this is the name of the user. You can also log out. These links are just dummy links, and that's pretty much the setup we have here. So this small project is not necessarily a representation of any project. It's just to allow us to understand how to apply permissions. So the idea here is this is the index page. At the moment, I've just logged the user out. If I go to projects here, it takes you to the project page. Now, at the moment, anyone can access this projects page, but of course, that isn't necessarily the desired behavior that I want to have in this application. I only want users of my business to be able to access the projects. As we mentioned in the previous tutorial, before we can apply permissions or authorization, users generally need to be authenticated. So what we want to try and do here is authenticate the user first before they can access any of the information that we want to show them. So in this scenario, the project scenario, we don't want to allow users to be able to access the project listings. So if we go back to our project listing page, it's just /projects. We don't want anyone to be able to see the projects, so we want to protect that first to ensure that the user's logged in. Now here we are just using simple functions. Again, I'll happily create a tutorial where we focus on purely class-based views. That's not a problem at all. So here what we can do is we can include a declarator. So there's loads of them in Django, and this is the login required. And this is probably the easiest way to protect a view from a user having to be logged in. So let's go ahead, and this is the view that's connected to that page. We just saw the project listing page that grabs all the projects and outputs them to a template. So here we simply just need to use this new decorator. So login required. There we go. So when we go back to our page and we refresh, we're automatically forwarded to the login page. So looking at our project here, we can probably say that in addition to that, the actual project detail page, well, user must be logged in to view that. And also the create the project page, we need to make sure also that the user's logged in before they can create a page. So we've now protected our application to ensure that the user must be logged in to access any of the critical data or to be able to add new projects. So like we saw, there are 4 users. So admin is the super user here. The password is always going to be password for each of these users. Let's just get it right. Okay, so now I'm logged in. I can now access the projects. So let's just navigate over to the admin area. So I've gone over to the admin area here. Let's just go into the users. So we have 4 users. So we have a team leader, project member, and a project manager. The whole point of this is to kind of showcase maybe different types of groups or different users who may need to interact differently within our project. So let's take a look at how to use permissions to restrict access to different views. So really simple. Let's go ahead and create a new group. Let's just call this manager. Now we're going to make the assumption that a manager can see everything, all the projects. So we're going to create this new project. So actually, let's make a new project here. So manager. So I'm just going to press, let's go ahead and go into the permissions here that will automatically set up when we migrated our model. Remember, we've got this model called project here. Notice that Django creates 4 permissions automatically. So let's just use one of these built-ins. So can view project. So we're creating a group here called manager, and we're assigning this permission to that group. Right, so can view project, save. Right, so now we have that. We'll go ahead and go into our project user project manager here. And then we're just going to associate that user to the manager group. So that user is now part of that group. That group has been assigned permissions. So therefore, this user now has access or has those permissions connected to this user, the user project manager. Right, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and just save that. So if we go back into our code, let's go to the top here. Now, where we got this decorator before, let's extend this and let's also bring in the permission required. And it really is as simple as this. So in addition to being logged in to access the project listings, we're also now going to utilize permissions. So we're going to say permission required, and then we just need to define what permission is required. So in this case, we just need to remember the format here, which is the app label. So the app label is project, and then the actual permission name, so view project. So if we're not too sure, if you open up your database, remember here I've got the extension SQLite extension, so I can go into the auth user, I go into the permissions table, and I can have a look at the permissions, and you can see here that when actually I just know that number 7 is referring to the project app, and you can see that this is the name of the permission, and I'm utilizing that. It's called the code name. So I'm utilizing that in the second component here. So how do I know that 7 is the actual application, the project application? If you go into, if I just move this out a little bit, if you go into the content type, you can see that number 7 is associated to my project app. So that's how I know number 7 in the permissions table is connected to those permissions that we just saw. So I'm going to say as simple as that. So now I've defined, you can define multiple permissions here. Of course you can, but here I've just defined one permission. So the user must be logged in and they must have this permission, whether it be part of a group or individually provided that permission. They must have or be associated to that permission to access this resource. So just remind ourselves of the user project manager username. So just grab that, and then I go ahead and just log out this user. I'll log back in again. So user project manager, the password is going to be password. So I'll log back in and have a look at the project listings, and you can see I can access the project listings. So it's well worth noting that the admin user will be just to be able to access everything at this point. So if you are an admin user, if the user is a super user, then they will be able to access this anyway. So they will have permissions to override these permissions. So because the user that we're currently using here, this manager, is not a super user, they have been set up as a staff member, but they're not a super user, then these permissions applied to them and we're now following them. So that user can now access that. So let's go back in and access another user. So let's log in as the admin, just showcase that. So if I add it, log in as admin, you can see that by default, because they're a super user, they can access all the resources anyway. So let's log out and log in as the third person. So this is a user, this is a project, I think it's called project user 1. Nope. Okay, so you're not too sure. If you go back into your code, go into your project and then into your fixtures, you'll find user project member 1. Okay, that's what we're looking for. So remember, this user, we haven't set any permissions for them. So they can log in, they can see the project listings, but notice that straight away they get sent back to the login page. And the reason why that is because at the moment, because they don't have the permission associated to them that's required in order to access this resource, they cannot access the resource. So therefore, they're just taken back to the login page by default. You can change that. You can redirect them somewhere else. But at the moment, that's just the default behavior. Of course, that could all be fixed if we went into users and went into the user project member 1, and then we gave them access to the manager group. So if we added them to the manager group and press save, then now they will have those privileges. So let's just go ahead and go back into project listing, and you can see that now they have access. So that is just a kind of a general concept of how you're going to use groups. So the idea is that generally, if you apply permissions to users, then it can get a little bit out of control very quickly if you've got lots of users. So obviously having groups, we can add users to groups, apply permissions to the groups, and that can make it easier to manage multiple users. So let's just go ahead and go back into our user here and let's just remove them from that. Now, there are obviously programmatic ways of setting this all up. Here, we're just using the default tools that are provided by Django. So we can probably make the assumption now that the user must be able to view the project to actually access the project listing. So we'd probably make the assumption that that's the same type of permission that we want to add for the project detail. So they can view the project detail. And then in addition to that, to actually create a new project, they're probably going to need that permission too. So let's go back into our groups and let's just add a new group and let's just call this project user. So the project user, all project users must be able to just view projects. There we go. So we'll just save that. And now what we can do is go back into our users and let's add our project member to that group, just a project user. So now they should be able to access those resources. So let's go back here as a project user. So just refresh. We have permissions there. We can access the individual project detail. Let's go back and you can see that I can add a new project too. So clearly at the moment, anyone who has this permission can access these resources. Now, it just happens that I don't want anyone to be able to create a project. I think that only the project manager should be able to create a project. So let's now build a custom permission and let's apply it to the manager so that only the manager can access create project. So you can go ahead and create permissions programmatically. Of course you can. But to manage permissions, it can be quite nice to have it close to the models. So it's really easy to add a new bespoke permission in that we just need to set up the meta here in our model, and then we go ahead and set permission. So let's add a custom permission here. So permissions, let's say this equals, and then we need two things here. So the first is the name. So let's go for can add new project. So notice the underscore here. So that follows the same pattern. If we go back into the permissions here, that's following the same pattern as the code name, using underscores to divide the words. So that's our code name. And then in addition to that, we can then add some sort of description. So user, or let's just say can add new project. There we go. So let's just remember this is not a function. This is a class. Apologies. Okay, there we go. So now we have our new permission here. Let's just go ahead and just close this server down. And then we just need to run through, so we've got to make migrations. So that will add the new permission. And then of course you just then need to migrate. And now what's happened is that new permission should now be in the permission table. So if we take a look at that, at the bottom here, it should be in 7. There we go, can add new project. There are a few different permutations utilizing the permission required decorator. So have a look at the Django documentation and just have a quick read through. So for this scenario, we want to ensure that only project managers can create a new project. And at the moment, you can see this user here who's logged in can currently access not only all the projects, but also they can add a new project. So we want to restrict them to this view. So we can add more permissions. So let's go ahead and do exactly that. So this is the first permission, and then we use a comma, and then the second permission, that was called project in the project can add new project. Okay, so that's our second permission. So let's just finish that off. Okay, so now we have 2 permissions required. So let's go back into here and refresh, and you can see I'm taken to the login page because this user does not have access to now create a new project. We can check to see if that's working. Let's go into our user that we're logged in as. Let's just give them the permission. So let's go into the user permission here and give them the the can add new projects. So let's just give them that permission. If we go back here, I'm utilizing a private window, so I don't need to worry about the session data. I'm logged in as admin here, and this is obviously now separate. So let's go back into project listing, new project, and you can see that I now have access to new project. And if I change that back, remove this and save, you can see now when I refresh, we don't have access. So let's just go back into our groups. Anyone who's a manager can have this permission. So we'll go back into project, can add new project. So anyone who's in the manager group can now add a new project. Anyone else cannot. So now that leads us into utilizing permissions within templates, because we only want to show this button if the user does actually have permissions to add a new project. Otherwise, it's a little bit redundant. This user will always be sent back to this login page unless we change it. Of course, we could get them to be redirected. We could set that up, but maybe it's better to only show this button if they actually have permission to add a new project. So these views are connected to templates. We have a template folder here within the project folder. And what we're looking at here, then we have the index page. So we're extending from base on each of these pages. So we have an index page, that's the home page, and then the project, which shows all the projects, and then the detail page. So it's on the project page where we have this, if I just expand this, we have a button here. Now this is using Bootstrap. So I just go ahead and word wrap this. Where are we? View. Okay, so here I'm using Bootstrap. So here we have the new project button. So this is really simple. Let's just go ahead and check to see if they've got permission. So we need an if. So we're going to need an if. Yep. So if perms dot project. So the name of the project and then the permission. So can add new project. So if they do have that permission, they'll be able to view this button. It's as simple as that. Oh, no, let's grab that. Okay, so just a simple if statement within our template here. And then if they do have this permission, they will be able to see this button, else they won't see the button. So let's go back into here, refresh. Now this user does not have the permission and therefore the button is removed. So let's log this person out. Let's log back in as the manager. So that was user project manager, password, and they can see the project and they've now got access to the new project. So they're able to now actually view, not only protected for the view, but also we've now extended the permissions into the template to access the button to access this view. So hopefully now you can start to see how you can utilize groups, assign users to groups and use those groups to now apply permissions to determine access to different resources in your application. So you can start to see how important it is to start planning ahead, thinking about your groups, and remember that users can be part of multiple groups. And then you need to be careful to make sure that those groups have sufficient privileges to ensure that users don't have too many privileges. So it can get fairly tricky fairly quickly once you start scaling your application. So hopefully in this tutorial, it was a concrete example of applying permissions to views and also applying permissions within templates. We've seen that we can create custom permissions very easily and apply those within our views. And then we saw how to manage users in groups. Like I mentioned at the start of this tutorial, I wanted to create a concrete example so that we can then move forward with suggestions in this tutorial series. And something that is missing, I've just thought about, is testing these permissions. So maybe that is something else that we focus on in this video tutorial series. If you have got this far, thank you very much for listening. Please keep the comments coming. Happily have a look at any kind of aspect or bespoke area which you want to have a look at in regards to permissions. And I hope to see you in the next tutorial.